e3TV Inspire radio show. We have today Stefan Aarnio, who I feel so blessed and honored that he was able to find time out of his crazy busy schedule to join us. Stefan Aarnio is an award-winning real estate investor, entrepreneur, author, and winner of 2014 Rich Dad International Hall of Fame Award. He's been featured in Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine and Entrepreneur magazine, named him one of the top 10 real estate influencers to follow. Starting with only $1,200, Stefan has built a multi-million-dollar portfolio for himself and his partners and been recognized on the self-made list. And what I really love is Stefan's philosophy. It's simple: find great deals, build a fantastic team, pay everybody, and create partnerships for life. So welcome, Stefan. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we feature entrepreneurs on our show that have wisdom and advice to offer through their own experiences. And I first was introduced to you for our speakers here last fall in San Diego. I heard Stefan speak at a conference and I was blown away. I was just captivated from beginning to end. He has such a different and unique way of presenting. And I think what I appreciated the most is just his ability to be so real and raw. And that just is not something we get a lot of in this world. And to be able to represent and speak to entrepreneurs, I think, is a much needed area to inspire. So thank you again for being on our show. And we would love to, I'd love to start by learning more about where you started and what your life as an entrepreneur has been.
Well, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. Well, when I was 16, I wanted to be a rock star. So I told my mom, I told my dad, I want to be a rock star. And of course, my dad said, no, that's a bad idea. Go work at the bank. And my mom said, well, you know, I support you, so you can go to music school. And so I graduated from high school, went to music school at the university. I dropped out of music school. I dropped out of computer science. I dropped out of the business school and finished with a major in English and minor in music. And at age 22, was looking for work. And the only job I could get was a $10 an hour call center job in the middle of the night. And I was a guitar teacher, teaching guitar on the side, making about $10,000 a year guitar teaching. And I realized that, you know, go to school, get a good job. The degree thing doesn't really work. I listened to the advice. I listened to that Western world advice: go to school, get a good job. That's going to solve everything for you. And it just left me with a post-grad depression. You know, I'd spent all that time, all that money, and I realized I was no further ahead. In fact, I was behind what I could have been doing because I was making more money painting houses in the summer than I was making even with a degree job. So I had a wake-up moment there where I realized no one's coming to save me. And I read a little book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it said, you know, anybody could get rich in real estate. My band had fallen apart. That was my business. That was my plan, to get rich or die trying with the rock band. And the band was gone. And I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I realized anybody can get rich if you go into real estate. Real estate will make anybody rich over time. So I started studying. I started going to seminars. I spent all my money. I spent money I didn't even have. I went into debt, going to seminars, learning how to get into real estate. And by 28 and a half, was a self-made millionaire through business and real estate. And I'm 31 and I train other people because people ask me for trainings. I've written 5 books now. We do seminars, we do real estate still. So I have like a little multifaceted business now, you know, multiple divisions, multiple lines of business. And we just keep growing and growing and growing. So that's the Stefan Aarnio in a nutshell.
That's amazing. And when you talk about going into debt and having to take those risks, what do you find was like your driving force to keep going? Because I'm sure most of the people in your life or in your circle would not have necessarily encouraged the process, especially based on your educational background and how this direction was so different than what you had already invested in schooling for.
I refuse to be poor. I refuse to be poor. I just, you know, I was poor I was paying a $300 rent for a room at my mom's house. I owned no assets. I had very low income. Technically, I was poor. You know, I had no assets, no nothing. And so I refused to be poor. That was a big thing for me. I said, no, I'm not going to be poor. I refused to be poor. Even when I didn't have money, I refused to get into a poverty lifestyle. I took 70% of my income and I saved it. And I just always wanted to be, I guess, a rich and famous rock star. When I was 7, I wanted to be an inventor. I always wanted to be successful. And to have that moment of disgust where you're not where you want to be in life, that's a big wake up moment. And to change, you have to be disgusted. You have to be in a moment of disgust first to trigger the process for change.
That's powerful. You have to be at that lowest point of just disgust to be really clear on what you don't want. Is that what you would say?
Well, it's disgust. You have to be disgusted with yourself. And I think part of that is you have to own it. You have to own yourself. And I think with a lot of people, they get into poverty and they're victims about it. They're like, oh, you know, the government did this to me, or my employer did it to me. You know, I didn't do it to me. Well, I was owning my situation. I said, wow, I did this to myself. And I'm disgusted at what I've become. I'm disgusted with my situation. I never thought I would be here. This wasn't part of my plan. What am I doing? And when you have that disgust, it's like going out to, like, let's say like a restaurant, like you're going out for a steak dinner and you have béarnaise sauce and you eat the béarnaise sauce and the steak and you vomit everywhere. Well, you're never going back for béarnaise sauce and steak ever again.
Right.
Because that's disgusting, right? You reach that point and you're never going to do that again. You're going to do everything but that restaurant because you almost vomit on the way your life is. You go, I don't like this life. I'm never going back. And a lot of people have moments like that. A lot of successful people, they have a why moment where they go, I'm never going back to this moment. I'll do anything and everything to never come back here.
And that serves as a point of reference, you would say. That's very powerful and almost like a contrast that you can refer back to that keeps your momentum going.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of very successful people have a very strong why. And for me, it was when I was 17, I came home from music school and I saw my dad on his knees in the kitchen begging my mom for a second chance. He wasn't making money. He was an entrepreneur. He was trying it for 16 years, wasn't doing well. And she told him she wanted a divorce and he was begging. And she laughed at him. And I got to see her laugh at my dad on his knees. And I saw that. I was 17. I just went, whoa, man, I'm never going to be you. I'm never going to be you. I'm going to learn to create money. I'm never going to have a money problem like this. It's never going to be a production problem for me. So, you know, my life, I've got my own set of problems, but that's not going to be one for Stefan Aarnio.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier about the victimhood. And would you say that when we're stuck in feeling like a victim, that prevents us from even pulling out of it? And how would you advise people to kind of shift that mindset?
Well, you can't solve a problem you don't own. So if you don't own it, you can't solve it. And I just finished writing a book called Hard Times Create Strong Men. It's coming out probably in June. And, you know, we live in a society right now where we have weak men, and good times in our society has created weak men. And we just don't own our problems anymore. You know, you see a lot of people blaming the government. You've got people blaming, you know, women blame patriarchy, whatever that means. All sorts of groups are blaming other groups for their problems, but nobody's owning up and just saying, okay, I own this problem, I'm going to fix it. And that's something that I've always tried to do my best, is own everything. Now, I think the definition of a man versus a boy, a man owns everything in his life. A boy doesn't own it. So, you know, we got all these people in our society with this boy mentality and the non-ownership mentality and the victim mentality. And you can't succeed unless you own everything, the good and the bad. You know, if you say, oh, my parents ruined my life, or my parents did this to me, you got to own the bad part of that, but own the good part. Well, they gave me all these good things too. So it's all about taking ownership. And if you can take ownership, you can solve it.
Wow. Yeah, that's can't be emphasized enough. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a reminder that should be on a daily basis for all of us. when you would go as an entrepreneur, would you say that there like the ups and downs is kind of the nature of it, or do you feel that you kind of hit that low and you can have a breakthrough? Or I suppose it's different for everyone, but for yourself, how could you speak on when you were at the lowest or the darkest? How did you keep faith, I suppose, in the process? Or how did you continue believing that there was a light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I don't know if there is a light, Carol. I mean, at the end of the day, I think to be an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be insane. You have to actually be insane. You have to be crazy. I mean, you're throwing all your resources down on the line. You're throwing all your time on the line, all your effort on the line. I've lost friends. I've lost relationships. I've lost family members. I've lost employees. I've lost business partners. You sign up for a lesson in losing when you're an entrepreneur. You're going to lose a lot, and you're going to be wrong a lot. And there are days that are up and you think you're a genius, and there's days, the next day you'll be down and you think you're stupid. And it's a very hard ride. You know, there's entrepreneur diseases. ADD is an entrepreneur disease. Bipolar is an entrepreneur disease. You know, sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. I try not to talk negative to myself, and I just keep showing up. I just keep doing it. And that's just, no matter how good or bad it gets, I keep showing up. I keep owning it. And just keep doing it. That's my thing. It's my game. And when I was 4 years old, my mom went out and bought me a Super Nintendo for Christmas because I wanted a Super Nintendo. And they were sold out in Winnipeg. So my mom went to the store and got the floor model boxed up for her 4-year-old little boy. And she brings it home, and I unwrap it. I'm so happy. A Super Nintendo is like the most exciting thing. And we plug it in. And actually, we couldn't plug it in because we didn't have a good enough TV. We had the old ass 1970s big box wood TV.
Right.
So I had to wait a day. I cried about that. I had to wait a day to get the right TV. I was frustrated, right? So we got the right TV hooked up, and I put in the Super Nintendo, and I'm playing, I think it came with one game, Super Mario. So I'm playing Super Mario, and I'm losing. I'm losing and losing and losing. I'm crying. And my mom says, "Oh no, I bought this thing for my boy and he's crying. I better take it away from him." So she takes it away from me. I cry more. Then she gives it back to me. I'm crying more. I just keep losing. And then I win at some point. I beat the game. I win. I put the game away, and I go get another game and I play that, and I keep playing and I keep crying and I keep losing, and then I win. And I'm still that 4-year-old boy playing Super Nintendo, except it's a bigger Nintendo. It's a bigger game. And I don't cry in public like a little 4-year-old, but that's the game. Like that, the game has never left. I'm still a 4-year-old boy playing my Super Nintendo, and I play it till I win, and then I go to the next game. That's what I do.
That's an interesting analogy. When you talked about, you mentioned briefly about ADD and bipolar. Can you speak a little bit more on that? Because are you able to shed a light on like the ADD attributes that are positive when you're an entrepreneur, and then the downfall of that? And what do you find is a great compliment when you're choosing people on your team to be able to balance that out, or to like bring out the best in yourself and in them?
I'm going to add depression to that. ADD, bipolar, and depression. I don't believe that those are like diseases, actually. I think that entrepreneurs have those. They will be depressed at some point, which is longing for the past, or living in the past. Anxiety is living in the future. Living in the moment is where you have neither of those. Right. And then ADD is a survival mechanism for, you know, if you're living in the jungle, the kids with ADD would survive in the jungle because all these things going on. But if you're sitting in a cubicle, ADD is going to make you nuts because you're trying to find, you know, something to stimulate you. So in a survival situation, ADD is an asset. So if you're taking a kid and you're drugging him with ADD or ADHD, that's bad because he just needs to be in a different environment. So maybe you got to put him in like a kitchen as a chef, or maybe you got to put him in like a wood shop. Or, you know, I have a friend, he was a really talented musician in my band. He had ADHD. He was a great musician, great athlete, and he's out as a lumberjack. He's a lumberjack. That's his job. He loves being a lumberjack. But you put him in math class, he hated math class. Right. So ADHD is a survival mechanism, and you don't want to wreck someone's survival mechanism. And then the last one's bipolar. Like bipolar is, dude, that's part of the game. You're going to be up some days, you're going to be down some days. Especially with entrepreneurship, because you have days where you might have 100 grand in the bank. You wake up the next day, you have $8,000 in the bank, and you go, holy shit, where did all my money go? And maybe you didn't have your bills lined up, or your cash flow wasn't managed properly, or something. And that can be a hit. If you have some surprises, there's always surprises. It always costs more. It always takes longer. I'm doing some programs right now. I'm making these journals for e-commerce, these customized Stefan Aarnio journals. It's taken me 2 freaking years to get these journals made in China. It's so slow. And I don't know if I got the wrong factory or the wrong supplier. I probably did, but that's just part of the game. Like I expected that to take 6 months or 3 months, and it's 18 months, 24 months now. I think I'm getting the shipment. It's going to be end of April next week. And I started this project in January 2016. So it's like pretty much a year and a half to get one little product made. Well, thank God I'm not surviving on that one product, because I'd be dead by now. But that's the bipolar nature of entrepreneurship. Like, I didn't know it was going to take a year and a half. And what do? Do you stop and go to another supplier? Well, you're already this far in, you might as well finish it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Who would you say, if it's not just one person, but the people that you've come across, either authors or speakers or just people in your life that have been instrumental in shaping your philosophy and helping you get to a place of understanding things like you talk about anxiety versus depression and living in the present moment? Who has influenced you the most that you can bring attention to?
Well, that's a tough question, because I read a lot of books. So, I got a bookcase behind me. I got a bookcase in another room. I got a bookcase in the hallway. I got a bookcase in that room over there, and then a little mini bookcase. So I got lots of books. I'm reading a lot. And it's tough. It's tough to really say one person, because I've flown all over the world and I've spent over $300,000 training myself.
Right.
That's excluding university. So it's really hard to give one person, but for the sake of the question, I'll give you somebody. When I was, he died, I think a bit over a year ago. His name's Bill Bartman. He was one of the top 100 entrepreneurs of all time, on the same list as Henry Ford. And Bill Bartman, I spent $10,000 US going to train with him when I was making $10,000 a year.
Wow.
So I literally spent my entire year's earnings in the US currency, which is like $1.30. So it's like 13,000, 14,000 Canadian. Plus I flew to Palm Springs to be there for a week, to spend a week with Bill Bartman. And there was 200 people in the room, and he was training 200 people in the room on how to be entrepreneurs and start up a debt buying business. And it was amazing, because at the time I had divorced parents. All I heard in my home was negativity. My mom was bitching about my dad. My dad was bitching about my mom. My brother was bitching about both of them. And it was just bitching all day long. And I go into this environment and I listen to this billionaire talk, totally different psychology, totally different energy. And we learned how to make business plans and loan proposals and company manuals. And it was a totally different experience being down there for a week. And, things like that really change your life. I remember sitting in, it's now called the Omni Rancho Las Palmas in Rancho Mirage in Palm Springs. Really nice hotel. And I went back there 2 years ago. I can afford to stay there now.
Right.
When I was there before, I couldn't afford it. So I went into this really nice hotel. It was marble. And I remember when I was broke, I ordered this lobster club. It was lobster meat on a club sandwich. And I was like, wow, lobster club. That must be what rich people eat. And so I my lobster club, and it was really amazing because I saw Bill eating lunch behind the stage, and he was eating a Subway sandwich, $5 footlong, to himself. So it was interesting because, the lobster club, I'm sure some rich people, some of them eat a lobster club, and then some of them are eating the Subway sandwich behind the stage. But what that did is it got the taste of nicer living in my mouth. It got the taste there, and got the taste of a marble floor and a marble bathroom. And it got the taste of what positive people sound like. And that experience and that taste really changed me. And I always like to go to, when I travel, I like to stay in a nicer hotel or a better hotel, like to stay at the Five Seasons or stay at the Ritz-Carlton or the JW Marriott. And you go in there and you go, ooh, this is really nice. I want my life to be like this. And you go home and you look at your own bathroom, you're like, time to get a better bathroom, right? Because your mind changed when you went in that better environment.
Interesting. That's really cool. Would you also say, like you talk about investing $300,000 on yourself essentially and your future, maybe not to that scale, but would you still encourage people that are building their business to that there is a component of investing in themselves and creating connections and collaboration that in the end go a long ways? Like even that $10,000 course, that was like your 1 year's worth of pay or income. Where did that take you from there? Like just changing you as a person, would you even be able to put value to that?
Well, it changes your mind when you spend $10,000 US on one item and you're making Canadian dollars. That changes your mind. Like you really think differently. Here's another example. So this is my own business. Did I see you guys in Calgary or was it Edmonton? You guys came out to Calgary, right?
Yeah.
When I was speaking. So I spoke in Calgary. Now that little event I put on cost me $75,000 to put that event on.
Okay.
And so I had to reach into my pocket and put $75,000 into that event to put that event on. And you might think about that and go, holy shit, that's a lot of money. Like, right. I don't care who you are, 75 grand, significant amount of money. Now that changed my mind because I went home and I did the math. I said, okay, so I got in front of 40 people for 3 days for 75 grand. What else can I do with 75 grand? Well, I did the math. 75 grand can buy me 500 YouTube videos this year. 75 grand can get me 208 podcasts produced. 75 grand can get me all these other things. So when you go into like training or marketing and you spend your money and you spend more than you have, it does change your life. It changes your mind because now you're forced to think bigger. And I coach people one-on-one and I charge 60 grand to coach someone for the year. Right. And that price is realistically too low. It probably should be more, but I'm a big value guy. I want to give lots of value. And when somebody spends 60 grand on themselves for the year for training, I'm not saying come train with me. I say train with anybody. But if you spend that kind of money and get good training, you're forced now to make 200, 300 grand on that training. If you don't, you're just not going to survive. So the law of the jungle comes out there. When you throw down big on something, when you commit, that's the word, when you commit to the training or when you commit to the marketing or you commit to the project and you put the money in, now you have to be successful. You're a loser if you walk away from your commitment.
Right. So then essentially you're investing in yourself and then you're walking away with a lot more long-term idea of how that can now be used, and you don't let yourself off the hook as well because you've put so much into it.
Well, it's interesting. I have a coaching company now, and we don't really do payment plans because when people do payment plans every month, they quit. Halfway through, they go, ooh, the pain and the suffering. I'm going to stop paying so I can save myself the pain and the suffering because we're all trying to avoid pain.
Right.
But when the guys, the guys or the girls put the money down up front, they're way more likely to succeed. And I've got the stats on that. I mean, people succeed when they invest up front, and success is painful. You got to pay in full for it. You don't just get it for free. And something to think about too is like, if you go to a log stove and you say, stove, give me some heat, give me some heat, then I'll give you the log. It doesn't work like that. You can't go to your car and say, drive me down the road, then I'll give you some gas. You got to have the gas in the car first.
Right.
And it's the same with all this stuff. So many people want success, but they don't want to pay for it. And the people who have the biggest success have paid the most. That's just simply all that it is. They paid the most time, effort, energy, money, blood, sweat, tears, education, read the most books, met the most people, tried the most times, failed the most times. They paid the most and they get the most.
Powerful. I would love to hear more. You talked about the jungle life. That reminded me of a conversation we had about a month ago where you talked about like taking some time away. I'm curious to know and would love you to share with our listeners how you're able to balance a life, because that the common thing with entrepreneurship is that we don't separate life at work versus our personal life. It all kind of blends together. How are you able to keep your sanity in a world of insanity? And what practice do you have for yourself? And yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
How do you keep your sanity? Is that the question?
Well, that's one question. Sure, we'll start with that.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if there is sanity in entrepreneurship.
Okay, well,
the odds are so against you. It's a 99% failure rate over 10 years. Like, you really, like, you're like the guy, if you ever see that movie, The Hurt Locker, you're the guy out there diffusing bombs for a living. Like, you pretty much have to be insane to have that job. Like, there's no, I don't even think there is sanity. If you're a real entrepreneur, if you're in there, if you're actually invested, a lot of people have like a side hustle and they call themselves an entrepreneur. You're really not. A lot of people are like real estate brokers and they're selling stuff. They call themselves entrepreneurs. They're not. When you're actually an entrepreneur and you have product and investors and inventory and employees and, you know, leases and stuff, you probably are insane. And I think all that you can do with that is date or marry somebody who's not insane and make sure you're the insane one in the relationship. And my coach says, you know, he says, Stefan, you're a balloon and you need to find a rock to tie yourself to. So hire a bunch of people who are rocks, date a rock, marry a rock. You can be the balloon. You can be crazy.
That's cool.
And you are crazy because there's the rationality. If you think about it, like sometimes I think about it, the odds and stuff, and the odds are so bad, you will actually lose your mind. So you can't think about it. You have to have faith. And faith is an interesting thing because you're skipping the logic. You're jumping ahead of the logic. You're pretending that you're going to be the 1% of the 100, the 99 fail. You're the one.
Right.
And you will be the one if you tell yourself you're the one. But that takes, I think you actually have to be insane. And sometimes I look at my life and the problems I have and I go, why did I sign up for this? And I go, oh, I did sign up for it. And oh yeah, even if I wasn't doing this, I'd sign up for something just like it. So I don't know if there is sanity in there. And anybody who says otherwise might be lying to you or trying to sell you a course on how to be sane. But I don't think there is sanity in it because you're never going to be sane in something with such a low success rate.
Right. That's something to ponder on. How would you define success in your own life? Like, how, at the end of the day, do you look at how you show up for yourself, for your business, and feel successful? Because you talked earlier about there's not really a light, there's not really a destination. So in the moment where you're not looking at the past or having anxiety over the future, how do you define success for yourself?
Well, that's a tough one because I don't believe in happiness. I think happiness is a result. It's a result of fulfillment. So if you're fulfilled, you'll be happy. If you're living your values, you will be happy. Happiness is a result. I don't believe it's something that you should make your ultimate goal in life because happiness comes and goes. It's typically, you can be happy by lowering your standards. Just lower your standards. You'll be happy. I mean, idiots are happy. Poor people are happy. Like, you can do that, but you're going to lower your standards to the point of being happy. That's what your ego does, by the way. It just keeps lowering your standards until your ego and your results match. Then it makes you happy. So hit me with the question again, Carol. I went on a tangent there about happiness.
So how would you define success for yourself?
Yeah. So defining success is it's doing what you set out to do. So, you know, you could be like a mom or want to be a mom and you could have 2 kids and look after those kids and you're successful. Or you could be a guy who wants to be the manager at the gas station and you're the manager at the gas station, so you're successful. Or you could be, you know, here's an example of unhappiness. Have you ever read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson?
I'm in the middle of it.
There's a great story in there about Dave Mustaine. He was a metal musician, a rock and roll guitar player, and he was fired from Metallica. So he was in the band Metallica and they fired him. And all he wanted to do, he made a new band called Megadeth, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not beat Metallica. So he was always unhappy his whole life. And he was never successful because his measure of success was to beat Metallica. Right. And Megadeth was a great band. They had lots of albums, and they're probably still around, still making money. He's a good singer, great guitar player, one of the greats. But if you always compare yourself to Metallica, you're never going to be successful or happy. Whereas Pete Best was the drummer in the Beatles, and he was kicked out of the Beatles. And he's totally happy with his life. He changed his measure of success, which was to be a good dad and to play some music once in a while and have a nice life. And he's very happy. So, you know, you look at that, getting kicked out of the biggest band ever, the Beatles, you think that guy could be totally pissed off. Right. And then on the flip side, you got this guy who's super successful, Dave Mustaine, who's pissed because he can never beat Metallica. So you kind of set your own target with that.
Right.
And someone who I admire is Steve Jobs. And people always say, oh, Steve Jobs died because he had a weird diet or he was fasting, or they make up BS reasons why Steve Jobs died. I personally have been studying Steve Jobs my whole life since I was about 12 years old. I think Steve Jobs died because his measure of success was up here. And even though he was great, he was only here. And I think it killed him. I think his anger in that just killed him the whole time. Like he was always up here, wanting to be up here, and he was, even with his greatness, was only there. And I think that just ripped him apart at some point because he was such a driver. And wow. You set that bar wherever you want. Like you could set the bar here. You could set, like I said, if you want to be happy, just lower your standards. Just keep lowering it to the point where eventually you just have to do nothing. You're the happiest guy sitting in your own mud, you know?
Wow, that's a great point you bring up, as well as like that chasing that when this happens, I'll be happy or I'll feel successful, and just constantly, like it's one thing to aspire to and to be driven by the potential of what you know is there, but to completely hold your standard of happiness to something that doesn't exist yet, will never exist, exactly like you just relayed with Steve Jobs.
Right. And I have the same disease as Steve in that I always have a new product coming out. I'm always so excited about the new product. It comes out. I'm happy for 10 minutes. Then I go to the next thing. And it is not again, I said you have to be insane to be an entrepreneur, because if you live your life like that, that's actually an insane way to live. But people like myself, people like Steve Jobs, these insane entrepreneurs drive all of the progress in the world. So there is a need for these insane people. Are they the happiest people? I don't know. Maybe not. But I don't know if life is really about happiness. Life is about whatever you make it to be. Right. And that journey or that fleeting moment, like I live for that fleeting moment where I open the box of books, I see my new book, or I get my new product. I'm so happy in that moment. And then 10 minutes later, it's gone. And we're just back to the next thing. So it's a tough thing. Like being an entrepreneur is really hard. And I don't know if it is for everybody. It really is for a very small subset of insane people.
Well, and yeah, it's interesting. I love what you said earlier about connecting yourself to rocks within your life, people that keep you grounded and allow you to still live in that world where you create the vision, because those are important aspects. And another point you brought up earlier was like really being discerning of your self-talk. And I think that's powerful as well, because you can have all of those other things that make you live in that world of insanity, but to constantly be checking in and being diligent with the conversations that are going on in your head about yourself, and recognizing that without self-compassion, that truly is a pathway for self-destruction.
Well, I think that's why the balloon needs a rock. You know, there are people out there who are healers. There are people out there who are supporters. There's, you know, when I don't have a girlfriend or a spouse right now, but typically the women I choose are teachers, nurses, healers. They have a little dog. They're worried about their diet all the time. They're vegans. They're like born and bred healers. So somebody insane like me hooks up with a healer, and that keeps some healing going, because, you know, a single person is really only half of a pair of scissors. You know, it's you're one half, someone else is the other half. And I'm the insane aggressive half. And then there's a healer half that can come onto that and maintain that energy, you know, so you need those other people. My office has 8 or 9 employees. All of them are supporters and people who clean up my messes. I come in and make a whole bunch of messes and they clean and they organize and they support and they put all those things together. And that's their job, is to pretty much be organized and execute and cross the T's and dot the I's. And I'm the insane one who's cooking the soup in the kitchen and making a huge mess.
Well, and it's people around you that recognize the beauty and the perfection of that mess. And seeing like the artistic like background of all of it and piecing it together and making it like a beautiful masterpiece.
Well, and that's their job. I mean, it's interesting. Like Tara, my assistant, you know, gorgeous blonde model. I always tease her. I say we're just going to get married because we're always together. So I tease her. I say we're going to get married, and she says, "Well, you're too high maintenance for me, and I want to be the high maintenance one." She says, and I said, "Well, sorry. Like the reason why I am so high maintenance, I got 8 or 9 people just cleaning up after me all day, and that's why you have a job." And it's ironic because Tara works for me. She's employed because I make so much messes. Her friend Kara is employed by a realtor who's listing this property right now. So I make enough messes for her friend.
Right.
And her mom works for the company that prints the books, which we've printed 5 different books now. We're always printing books. So I'm employing Tara, her friend, and her mom because there's so much mess. There's so much messes I create. There's so many things. And you know, people can complain about the mess and say, "Oh, you got so much work you make for me." But you can also look at it and say, "Wow, what great job security I have because this guy's always making stuff." So
well, exactly.
you can either say it's a positive or a negative. You can say it's job security and this is great. Or you could say, "Oh, more work." You know, you can look at it either way.
Oh, for sure. Your mess is an absolute gift. It's like, don't change who you are. It's changing the world and it's in your own way. And yeah, that's awesome. What are you most excited about right now? What's going on in your world, in your right here and now that you share with all of us, and how can people best get connected with you?
Well, I think there's a real shift going on right now, Carol. There's a shift going on in the marketplace. Bricks and mortar is dying. Seminars are dying. Media is surging. You know, if you look at, I just canceled all my seminars. I was going to go on a massive amount of seminars this year.
Right.
I canceled it all. My YouTube channel is popping every day. We got 1 or 2 videos coming out every day. I just launched my own podcast. We're doing minimum 2 shows a week. The media is where it's at, and media is the future. And your customers in any business are naked, lying in bed, watching Netflix, covered in pizza with their naked woman or whoever they're in bed with. It could be a boy, girl, dog, cat, whatever. And they're in bed and they're watching Netflix and they're on their phone.
Right.
And that's the customer of today. And so there's just been this big shift. You know, I posted on my wall today on Facebook, Guitar Center's closing, or they're looking for, I think, some bankruptcy protection or debt restructuring. Toys R Us is going down. Up in Canada, what just went down? Was it Eaton's? No, Eaton's been done for a while. Sears is going down. Future Shop closed. So all these businesses are just dropping like dinosaurs. And at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, all these new businesses are popping up and people are buying. They're still buying the same things, but they're buying in different ways.
Right.
And so as an entrepreneur, if you can get on the right side of that wave, you know, e-commerce is huge now. The media is huge. All of this stuff is great because instead of having a TV channel or instead of having a radio station, you can now be your own media company. So I think media is the future. E-commerce is the future. For me, it's products are the future. I'm releasing, like by the end of this year, I'll have 6 books published, 2 journals, a personality test, a full suite of courses. I'm product all day long.
Cool.
Because products are infinitely scalable, whereas your time isn't. And so I think if you're an entrepreneur out there, you got to embrace these new changes and don't give the market what you want. Give the market what they want. What they want is they want to sit in bed be naked, eat pizza, and do nothing. Human nature is very lazy. And the more lazy you can make this, and the easier it is to consume, and the free, everybody wants free. You know, I'm always asking, how do I give more free value? Because that is the human race, man. And you got to plug into the human race and sign up for it. And if you can do that and provide value, you're going to get a lot of back end sales.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm, for one, very excited about your new book coming out. I think that that topic is so needed. I have 6 boys myself, so I love to see men that are taking leadership roles the way you are, and just representing, being the elder in a sense that's missing in our society, that boys used to be taken as teenagers and taught to be men, and that's just not happening. So I'm excited to read it, to pass it on to others. And so we'll make sure we put all the links for our viewers as to how they can purchase that and any other products you have coming out, and how they can connect with you and go from there. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
You know, there's a quote by a feminist, and she says, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." And that's in the book. And, you know, some of this stuff, like Hard Times Create Strong Men, you get the book, it might piss a lot of people off, or
Right.
owning your life might piss you off, but don't be pissed off. You know, embrace it, own it. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. So don't worry about that. Just don't get emotional about it. Just find the best way, make it happen. Respect the grind. That's what I always say.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Stefan, for joining us today. It's an absolute honor to share this interview with you, and to be able to share your wisdom and what you've come to know and understand with our viewers. We're very blessed to have you, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a nice day to all our viewers. Thank you for joining us. And what do you say? Respect the
grind.
Excellent.